Greetings, YouTube. In the video I did on Interstellar War, someone asked me what would I consider a logical interstellar war? Because I think interstellar wars are really kind of dumb. And the reason is that prior to having the technology to have an interstellar war, an interstellar war looks like a really good thing. It will gain you resources, it will gain you space to colonize, to move into. It will give you a little more elbow room, if you will. But once you achieve the technological level to conduct interstellar war, those two concerns are gone. You have access to limitless resources, and you have access to limitless space to move into. You no longer need to go to interstellar war. So, I think interstellar wars are really dumb. However, I was asked, do I consider there to be a relatively logical version of interstellar war? So I've been playing with this idea in my head on and off for a while, and please, I'm going to make an announcement before I go any further. I thought of this prior to I ever heard of Mass Effect, or Mass Effect 3 in specific. I've been watching a Mass Effect playthrough by Tales of Lumen. A very entertaining chap. I highly recommend him. And so this idea has not been influenced by Mass Effect 3. But essentially, it would require the use of a machine intelligence. Now, I can think of two reasons for this interstellar war taking place. The first, I think, is the least interesting of the two, and that is it's a leftover weapon system. Somebody builds a weapon system, they use that weapon system in their war, things go very, very wrong, the weapon system wins, but everybody in the war loses, and the weapon system goes off looking for new targets. Now, this requires a weapon system that is probably not that intelligent. Smart enough to do its job, but it is not a fully sapient intelligence. It's sentient. It's aware of the universe around it. It's able to operate on its parameters it's been programmed with, but it is not contemplative. It is not asking questions, why am I a weapon? It is just doing its job as a weapon, as brutally efficient as it can. And to me, that works, but it's boring. And I think that it is still something that could be defeated, particularly if it's dealing with true sapient beings such as ourselves, because we can be creative in a way that a machine intelligence cannot. Particularly if we ever figure out how its operating system works, then it's in real trouble. The other suggestion I have is something that is a little more subtle, and it was inspired by the Wrath of Khan in the Genesis machine that is invented in the film. Now, the Genesis machine was essentially a nanotech virus, which would go into a planet and turn it into a completely viable world, even though it was originally dead. Obviously, the planet would still have to be within the right zone away from a sun to be able to function as a life-preserving planet. However, so long as it met the rough parameters of the right distance from its sun, depending on the sun's strength, the planet would then be converted to a place that could be colonized. So imagine that someone is working on a Genesis machine. They get it perfected, or close to perfected. It is sentient but not sapient. It is of animal intelligence, essentially. And it escapes. It's been programmed to optimize the world it is put onto for its host species. Well, the host species came up with this idea because their planet, like our planet, was being damaged by the species in question, except it had gone a lot further, so their planet is in really horrible shape, barely able to support the life that it requires to keep the species alive until they can get off the planet and start using their brand new spiffy colonization nanotech technology to survive elsewhere. So when this virus escapes, it perceives the world it's in as hostile to the host species it is programmed to customize planets for. And the world is hostile at this point. So the virus rewrites the planet. And in the process, wipes out the entire species that created it. Now, at this point, it begins to look around for other things to colonize. That's what its job is. It wants to do its job. Now, depending on how much a GM wants to use this mechanism, you could say it makes a copy of itself and then launches itself into space and goes on to another planet. All within relativistic times. So it means it's going to take, hundreds of years for it to get to the next world. And you could decide, does it do anything other than create a habitable world? Does it create cities? Does it populate them with robotic systems and cybernetic systems? So that the planet has cities that are up and functioning and waiting for colonists that never arrive because all of the people, the race that created it is now dead. Or does it just create a virgin world? I kind of like the empty city model. I think that's kind of cool. And you can decide, again, is it a single planet? So it goes on to the next planet, does it again. It goes on to the next planet, does it again. So there's this chain of worlds, each been perfected for this now extinct species. And you could decide how close this species is to the PC races. Is it within, like 10% or 5%, or is it even more exotic than that? Will the PCs be able to use the worlds as they are, or they will require some kind of breathing apparatus, or is the food on it not going to be palatable to them? You could play with it as much as you wish. Now, if you want to make this more of a plague, you say that it makes 2 copies of itself. That's all it takes, 2 copies. And then each time a planet is colonized, it makes 2 copies. And then it goes exponentially out from there, and it could really populate a large section of the known star system, our known galaxy, in, within 1 million years or so. And you could also say that some of these systems break down. So you could actually have planets where the systems that were supposed to maintain the cities have broken down, so that those worlds have now fallen into ruin, completely natural ruin. And maybe they've been out there so long that new species have evolved on those planets that have nothing to do with the original progenitor race. All they know is they come up and they evolve on this world that could or could not have a few functioning cities left. Gifts from the gods, literally. Or it could be a world that has no cities left. They've all just been destroyed, and they're just barely recognizable ruins that these people then discover at some future point. And they're like, who built these cities? It wasn't us. They've been here longer than we are. Unless you find them in a time of their development when they think it is their former cities. It could be their version of the 18th or 19th century. But in this particular version, that plague, that colonization plague, could have found its way to the PC's known space, and it is now beginning to damage different worlds. And now the PCs have to go in there, find a way of stopping it, and that's the plot for the campaign. Or they could just find a world that is now in some semblance of functioning or non-functioning. Could be a nice little post-apocalyptic thing if you want there for your campaign, and discover that this world was created for a species that never colonized it. So now they have to figure out why. Why did it never colonize it? Are there other planets like this out there? Obviously, the GM knows there is. And of course, the PCs can then take it from there. So, in essence, the only way I can justify anything that even vaguely borders on interstellar war is some kind of nanotech plague. Anything more advanced than that, and I think it's just absurd. I just don't see a living species wasting its time in interstellar war when there are endless amounts of resources and endless amounts of space in our galaxy, let alone all the other galaxies out there, even if you take relativistic time frames into account. So, I'm interested in hearing opinions about what I've done, and see if you can give me any new thoughts that I haven't thought of on what I've proposed.